If you are somebody who is right now asking yourself, who owns the copyright on a portrait of me? Gather round, we're going to learn something. So according to the US Copyright Office, and you can find this information on copyright.gov, if a photographer takes a photo of you, of me right here, if a photographer takes a photograph, the person who owns the copyright to that photograph, meaning the person who has the right to sell prints of that photo, to do whatever they want with that photo, is the photographer. It's the person who took the photo. Now, there are going to be lots of caveats here. The first one is on works made for hire. So a work made for hire might be, let's say I work for a newspaper. Let's say I work for a publisher of some kind, and I'm a photographer, like an in-house photographer that takes photos for this institution. I don't necessarily own the copyright still. It is the institution that I work for. Basically, the newspaper or the publisher or whatever would be the person who is the author or the owner of the copyright. Now, what happens if your work is used without your permission? Obviously, you sue them for copyright infringement. Now let's start getting into the very specific area of what if a photograph is used as the basis for a painting? Where is the line for copyright there? This is starting to be asked and answered in courts all over everywhere. So this photographer right here actually won a years-long lawsuit against this painter, whose entire shtick is basically taking photos, flipping them, making basically no edits whatsoever, and painting them, and then, of course, selling the paintings. The guy's won lots and lots of awards and was actually sued previously and won, but he did lose on appeal, and the photographer ended up winning because basically they said that the work did not meet a transformative threshold, that he did not transform the work enough that it represents a substantially different or new work of art. Now, why is being transformative important here? Here in the United States, we say that artistic expression is part of the First Amendment or free speech, and thus immune from liability for violation of privacy or publicity rights. Where we start getting into exceptions to this are commercial reproductions, once we start making lots and lots of money from things. So if I make a painting of somebody based on a photo that I found, that is not a violation of copyright or of any law, really. But if I start selling prints of it, it can start becoming a gray area because of the commercial rights. However, again, most courts consider prints to be free speech, just like the original artwork, and thus immune from rights of privacy or publicity. This website gives a few examples. So, for example, in New York, an edition of 5,000 prints of a painting depicting Tiger Woods was held immune as an artistic expression of free speech, but these kinds of rights do vary state to state. So, for example, in California, the standard is more subjective. We have a transformative standard. Basically, did the original subject, like we saw in that previous lawsuit, was the original subject transformed enough as to be a new work? Take it out of the realm of like photography and painting and other visual arts for a second. Let's think about music. Now we're starting to get into something called the fair use doctrine, which is something that I, as an author, know a lot about because sometimes I will quote people. I will quote other works whenever I am referencing them in my own published work. I will quote, maybe a line from a poem, or I know in my last book, I quoted a passage from Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. Part of fair use is you can use snippets of another piece of work as long as you are basically commenting on it or transforming it in some way. Where do we get this transformative use concept? From a 1994 decision by the Supreme Court in Campbell v. Acuff Rose Music. The court focused not only on the small quantity taken from the copyrighted work, but also on the transformative nature of the defendant's use. Basically, that it was transformed enough as to be a new work. You can fail the transformative use test, however. So there was an example where somebody used the style of Dr. Seuss to tell the story of the O.J. Simpson murder trial. That failed the transformative test because all they were doing was borrowing the style, and it wasn't like a parody or something. Posting a copyrighted work on social media does not automatically qualify as a transformative use, even though posting on social media promotes comment and criticism. And you can be transformative, but not transformative enough. Like in this instance where a Harry Potter encyclopedia used too much of the original text. Let's say your photo is taken by a photographer and you end up seeing it on the cover of something. Like this album by Vampire Weekend, Contra. Some of you might remember that this actually caused a lawsuit. Basically, the band was looking for cover art. They found a photo. They reached out to the photographer. They purchased the licensing rights for like $5,000. It ended up on the cover. Well, the woman in the photograph sued the band for $2 million because they said they didn't get her permission. Unfortunately, the law says all they really had to do was get the photographer's permission, but the model said that this was from a casting call and she didn't actually sign the release. So the photographer, I guess, shouldn't have ever taken her photo or couldn't use the photo or something like that because the photo was never released by her. She claimed that her signature was forged or something. This case was never actually adjudicated. A judge did not decide one way or another on this because they ended up settling out of court. The long and short of it is that it really was the photographer who owned the copyright, and the photographer can sell that. So let's say your photo is taken by a photographer. You have signed off on the photo being taken. The photographer then has the copyright, and let's say that photographer sells it to a stock photo site. That stock photo site ends up being procured, that library ends up being procured by a publisher, and they want to use your photo on the cover of a book. You could end up being on the cover of a book, especially if it's painted, especially if it's transformed. So unless the photo is like a selfie that you took of yourself, if you signed off on a photographer taking your photo for whatever reason, that photographer is the person that now owns the copyright. There's a little bit of an exception for celebrities and the threshold of celebrity and a celebrity likeness. We covered this a little bit previously when I talked about the Tiger Woods lawsuit, but like in this example from this website here, if you got a photo that was taken of Elizabeth Taylor, for example. She is a celebrity. She owns a right to her likeness. Celebrities of a certain threshold have a right to their likeness. You might need to seek the celebrity in question's permission before you sold subsequent prints or derivative works, unless it meets the standard for transformative art. So if the art has been transformed enough that it no longer is a reproduction, but is instead its own new thing, there's probably not a basis for a lawsuit there. Anyways, hope this helps if you were just curious whether or not a photo of yourself could end up being transformed into a painting and put onto a book cover without your knowledge, permission, or signing off, and whether you have a right to sue for that. Hope this helps. Thank you. Goodbye.